Senator John Glenn was recently in Columbus, and CUBE reporter Lorrie Secrest had an opportunity to talk with him. There will be an interactive question on the tape, so we want you to get your cubes ready, and please touch in.
He was the first American to orbit the Earth back in 1962 and was elected as a U.S. Senator from Ohio in 1974. And he's talked about as a possible presidential candidate in 1984. Senator John Glenn was in Columbus to speak to the Columbus Metropolitan Club, and I asked him what went through his mind while awaiting the launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia.
Well, I couldn't help but think back a little bit back to those days because, you know, I finally went on the 11th scheduled date back then, over a period of several months, and the fourth time I actually suited up and got up on the booster. So I couldn't help but think about that. But you know, this is a whole different breed of spacecraft now. It's much more bigger. It's the most complex and complicated spacecraft that's ever been built. Now, that could have been said of my spacecraft back then too, and I'm sure that sometime in the future there will be ones that make this Columbia look small by comparison too. But I couldn't help but think back to some of those days.
Yesterday's Wall Street Journal reported that Soviet space officials are portraying the flight of Columbia as the start of a new militaristic and chauvinistic effort by America to blackmail the world with super weapons. How would you react to that?
Well, you have to consider the source on one like that, I think. Obviously, they're putting a political connotation onto it. The facts are that since we have had a manned space flight in this country, our last one was 1975, the Soviets have sent up 21 manned flights with 43 different astronauts. They've accumulated somewhere over 2 years of astronaut time in space doing different research and military projects. And so I think at this time, when we are just getting going again here, if they want to throw stones at us, fine, but they've been going along this line all the time.
Speaking of military efforts, what is your opinion about the proposed B-1 bomber and the MX missile in particular? Do we need these in the United States?
Well, if you look at what's happened around the world in the last few years and the need for conventional military weaponry, I don't think there's any doubt that we need to start building. The Soviets have outspent us by some 30 to 50% for about the last 14 or 15 years, since just after they were embarrassed at the Cuban Missile Crisis and they started building. And so they have built a ground force that is definitely superior to ours. There is no doubt about that. I think we still have a superior Navy and Air Force. But I think if we let this whole thing go much longer, we take a chance of actually becoming the world's second-rate military power. Now, even as they have come close to us in military power, we've seen the first coup in Afghanistan, help for Syria and Iraq, the use of Cuban surrogates with Soviet equipment in Angola and Zaire and Somalia, Ethiopia, South Yemen, on the border of the Saudi Arabian oil fields. They doubled their presence in the Indian Ocean. They took over the islands, the disputed islands north of Japan. They just put 12,000 Soviet troops in that area. And they've been supporting Vietnam in their invasion, their takeover of Cambodia, Kampuchea as it's now called. Now, that's a colonialist power on the march. And I don't think we can any longer just sit back and say, well, they are just nice fellows and we shouldn't oppose them, because if they're doing that now, then I don't think we have any choice but to get our military going again and get it up so that we are a superior military power.
Do you still consider us, though, at this point in time, number one?
Well, it depends on what job has to be done. In overall military power right now, would I rather be here than in the Soviet Union? Yes, definitely. As far as ground forces, though, do we have a superior ground force in this country? No, we'd have to say no to that. We do have, I think, superior naval forces still, although they are building very, very rapidly. And unless we do some naval building of our own, if you just project these curves on out, you'll find that they cross and probably let the Soviets be the superior naval power in the world by somewhere around 1988 to 1990. So we can't see that happen.
Are you satisfied with President Reagan's increase in the defense budget?
Increase in the defense budget, yes, but it needs better definition. It needs to be spelled out as to what it's going to buy. We need to very clearly define where we need the greatest refurbishing of our defense forces.
Would that be in the land forces? In
the land forces to some extent, naval forces, absolutely. And I also favor a new bomber. The old B-50, the newest B-52, the newest one was purchased just a little less than 20 years ago. And that's the newest one. Now they're getting very, very old. And I think we do need a new bomber, because what we have seen going on around the world, as I mentioned a moment ago, is conventional warfare being used to advance their causes. We can use naval task forces to bring an awesome amount of power to bear in certain areas, as we are capable of doing in the Persian Gulf area right now. But in other places where we might need to project power, or put mines in a harbor, or show the flag some way, we don't have ways of projecting that power now. We don't have that many carrier task forces to put around the world. So a new bomber to do that will carry the old iron bombs, the cruise missiles, and nuclear weapons, can be in effect almost an airborne tiny little task force all of its own.
Will the B-1 do those three things?
A variation of the B-1 could. It was my amendment on the Senate floor that required the study that we hope will result in a new bomber, or what type the Pentagon recommends. That study is overdue to be presented to us, and I think we'll have it in a few days, probably now.
Senator, let's just ask our viewers at home for their reaction. Do you agree with Senator Glenn that the United States does indeed need a new bomber? If you do, touch button 1, and if not, button 2, and touch when you see the sign. If there were one main foreign policy change in the United States, what would you like it to be?
I think we need to have a foreign policy that defines better what our objectives are in different parts of the world, how much we hope to help people there, or what we want to see them become. Do we want to advocate democracy, capitalism? Are we settling for something else? Do we want to have, is it just peace for peace's sake and let people develop as they see fit? Do we want to spread our views of what we think have benefited us? I think these all are part of a well thought out foreign policy. I don't think we have that now.
A recent Columbus Dispatch editorial claimed you were concerned that Americans would not be investing their proposed 10% tax relief. Can you just elaborate a bit for us?
I sure can, because I think one of the big things we need is capital investment so that industry, business can modernize. We're not having that amount of modernizing being done in business these days. As a result of that, we're losing our competitive edge. We're not doing the research necessary. We're seeing literally hundreds of thousands of jobs in effect transferred abroad, and they're not coming back unless we do the research necessary to get them back and do the capital investing. These days it costs on an average of $55,000 to $60,000 for each industrial job, and some of them that are highly technical jobs are even more than that. So the Reagan tax proposals are supposed to help industry and help this capitalization that we have ignored for too long, and I agree with the problem. But what the proposals to take care of that problem are that we give faster depreciation, the so-called 1053 bill, and in addition to that, we're going to make tax cuts over here for the middle and upper income people. And supposedly they will then have that available not for the daily necessities of life, but they'll be able to invest it. But what if they don't? What if they buy a new refrigerator? What if they buy a new carpet? What if they take a long delayed vacation? What if they speculate in land? Every dollar taken off that does not come back in this kind of investment in business, and Mr. Stockman, representing the administration, says that it has to come back on the order of between 50% and 70%, or the whole program starts falling apart. Now, I don't think that it's necessary to have this spillover, trickle-down tax idea to get money into business, which is where you really do need it. What I would propose is not only the 1053, but a better investment tax credit, a capital gains advantage that wouldn't phase in over 4 years. It would come in now. This puts money directly into business and creates jobs, creates employment. We're not going to see those jobs then going to Japan and Germany, which we're seeing too often now.
So then the middle class would then not have any sort of tax relief? Or
polls of this country have shown that people are far more concerned about inflation than they are about getting a tax cut right now. 70% of the people agreed with that.
You're often mentioned, Senator, as a possible Democratic candidate for president in 1984. Where do you stand on that now, and is this something you're pondering, perhaps?
I think much of the speculation has been premature. Because of the big win I had here in Ohio, and because Ohio is sort of representative of the whole country, has elements of the whole country, why there was speculation immediately after the election last year as to what might happen in my regard in 1984. But I think people were asking that question before President Reagan was even sworn in, and so I thought that was a bit premature. But my main interest is where the country is going and where what ideas the president puts forward. And I don't think we're going to know what those proposals are for probably the next 8 to 12 months. And if the country is moving well and I'm happy with those directions, why I probably would not be inclined to do anything. But if there are areas where I think we had some ideas that might fit in better, why that's certainly an option I'd have to consider, and I'm keeping all those options open right now.